Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. Merci beaucoup à toutes les participantes et participants de nous rejoindre. So we are going to take just a few minutes to let everyone join in. And in a few minutes, we are going to specify how to set up your channel to get English interpretation, French interpretation, and normally you already see the international sign interpretation. So Miriam, the floor is yours, and I'm here to support on the technical side as planned. Welcome everyone, bienvenue.
Thank you very much, Ax. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us this afternoon. Thank you very much for honoring our invitation and for joining us as we launch this report today. We value your presence and contribution, and we hope this launch will give you an opportunity to hear from us and us an opportunity to hear from you. Once again, welcome. And I would now like to invite Ax to explain a few logistical details before we move to the next set of the launch. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam, and welcome again to everyone. Thank you so much for joining. So this is just a quick explanation on how to find the right language. So this event is going to happen in English as well as in French. So if you're bilingual, English and French, you can just listen to the main audio. If you want to follow the event in English only, please click on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. It's a little planet icon and you select English. If you want to follow the event in French, please click on that same interpretation button, icon of a planet, and select French. And if you want to follow in international sign, please, you can have a look at your screen and it's already displayed for everyone. So I'm also putting all the instructions I have just mentioned in the chat, so you can refer to it in writing if necessary. Okay, Miriam, the floor is yours. Participants are still joining, but I think we are starting right now this event.
Thank you very much, Ax. I'll introduce myself. My name is Miriam Denge. I work at International Disability Alliance, a global member association of 14 regional and global association of organizations of persons with disabilities. I work as a human rights advisor. I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya, and I'm delighted to be a general moderator today for this report launch. We are joined by our colleagues in Lilongwe, Sophie, and in Dakar in Sophie, and then we have Ruth joining us from Malawi, Lilongwe. So thank you so much. Just to give an overview of how the launch would look like, the launch is set into three parts, sorry. The first part is setting the scene, looking at the findings and the recommendations of the report, and explaining in details how the report came into being. The second part is inviting our experienced and very privileged, diverse panelists to react to the recommendations and the findings and to inform us of how they're going to utilize the recommendations and the key findings of this report. And the last part is to hear from you, your comments and your questions, which will be addressed to our panelists, and then the final part of launching the report. So thank you once again for joining us wherever you are. We are really privileged to have you today. Without further ado, I would like to welcome our first speaker, Ms. Florence Dinos, who is the International Programs Director from Humanity&Inclusion, who will focus on the importance of collaboration and partnership. Welcome, Ms. Florence.
Thank you very much. Mesdames et messieurs, chers partenaires, collègues et amis, c'est un honneur de prendre la parole aujourd'hui à l'occasion du lancement de ce rapport crucial, Puissantes mais ignorées, les femmes africaines, handicapées et la lutte pour l'inclusion 30 ans après Beijing. La lutte, c'est bien de cela qu'il s'agit. Nous publions ce rapport dans un contexte global marqué par des reculs inquiétants contre l'égalité de genre et les droits des personnes marginalisées. Les femmes migrantes, les femmes vivant en zone de conflit, celles vivant en zone rurale et particulièrement touchées par les effets du changement climatique, les femmes autochtones et bien sûr, les filles et les femmes handicapées sont encore globalement laissées à l'écart des grands mouvements pour les droits des femmes et des personnes handicapées. Les promesses faites à Beijing sont largement restées cela, des promesses. Les principaux obstacles identifiés dans ce rapport sont les suivants. L'exclusion socio-économique. Les données de 51 pays indiquent que seulement 20% des femmes handicapées ont un emploi, contre 30% des femmes non handicapées et 53% des hommes handicapés. La violence. On estime que 83% des femmes handicapées seront victimes de violences sexuelles au cours de leur vie. Et puis, le manque de participation significative et la sous-représentation des femmes handicapées en politique en raison de la discrimination sociétale, d'environnements inaccessibles, du manque de ressources et de leur exclusion de facto des quotas légaux de genre. Les conclusions de ce rapport illustrent de manière frappante la réalité. Les femmes et les filles africaines handicapées, dans toute leur diversité, continuent de se heurter à des obstacles systémiques profondément enracinés. Travailler à leur côté, c'est reconnaître leur voix et valoriser leur agentivité. Ce rapport, fruit d'un solide travail interagence, en est la preuve concrète. Il illustre aussi bien la collaboration, à quel point elle est essentielle pour amplifier l'impact de nos actions en faveur des droits humains pour toutes et tous. Chez Humanité et Inclusion, nous nous engageons fermement en faveur des droits des femmes handicapées depuis des décennies. Je suis particulièrement fière de célébrer cette année le 10e anniversaire de notre projet phare, Making It Work, genre et handicap. Ce projet féministe et antivalidiste incarne notre vision d'une société inclusive et juste en appuyant les femmes handicapées et leurs organisations représentatives dans la lutte contre les violences et les discriminations. Le projet Making It Work ne se contente pas de sensibiliser. Il co-construit, il transforme, il s'engage sur le temps long aux côtés des filles et femmes handicapées actrices de changement. Ce sont leurs réalités, leur expertise et leur vécu qui peuvent éclairer et enrichir les mouvements pour les droits humains et l'égalité de genre. À l'aube du 30e anniversaire de la déclaration et du programme d'action de Beijing, notre responsabilité collective est claire. Nous devons redoubler d'efforts et œuvrer avec encore plus de détermination pour que les voix et les droits de ces femmes soient pleinement reconnus et protégés. Ensemble, assurons-nous qu'aucune femme ne soit laissée pour compte. Et je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Madam Florence, for your remarks and for emphasizing the importance of leaving no one behind. Our second speaker is Ruth Kumtula, who is the Executive Director of Disabled Women in Africa. Ruth will be taking us through the drafting process of this report, the survey, and will also share the key recommendations and findings of this report. Over to you, Ruth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miriam. First and foremost, we want to really celebrate the collective efforts that have culminated this important report titled "The Powerful Yet Overlooked African Women with Disabilities and the Ongoing Struggle for Inclusion." Just to give you a background, the report has been co-authored by DIWA, WFD, HI, but also IDA. The process of developing the report was multi-staged and participatory, involving both regional and national consultations. We conducted desk reviews. We conducted continental survey with the title of "My Voice from Africa." And it was widely disseminated from mid-April to end August 2024. And this survey was available in almost 4 languages: English, French, Portuguese, but also international sign. The survey was completed by almost 244 respondents, comprising 241 women with disability, 1 non-binary person with disability, 1 trans woman with disability, and 1 transgender person with disability as per the expressed self-identification. The majority of the respondents were coming from East and Central Africa, comprising of 59%, and 25% was West Africa, and we had respondents about 16% from the Southern Africa. In total, we had almost 23 countries that were represented in the survey. The majority types of disabilities that had responded, almost 50% were those with physical disabilities, and 24% with hearing impairment, and 11% with visual impairment, and 5% were with psychosocial disabilities. As per the findings, in summary, the report discovered that the promises of gender equality remain unfulfilled for African women and girls with disabilities 30 years after the adoption of the Beijing Declaration Platform for Action. And of course, despite the presence of other key notable instruments such as the Maputo Protocol, the CEDAW, the AGP, as well as the CRPD. The report underscores that women and girls with disabilities are still largely invisible in development policies, economic programs, and decision-making processes. For instance, there is a socio-economic exclusion. Women with disabilities face significantly higher rates of poverty compared to the male counterparts and women without disabilities. They do experience gender-based violence at disproportionately higher rates and in unique forms as compared to women without disabilities. They are rarely engaged in national and regional decision-making processes. Their voices are excluded from spaces that addresses human rights, but also gender equality and development. They are underrepresented in politics due to societal discrimination, inaccessible environments, and lack of resources. They are also encountering difficulties in being meaningfully included in disability rights spaces, which often prioritize male leadership. In some feminist spaces, women with disabilities are also even being excluded due to internalized ableism, with their concerns often overlooked or even inadequately addressed. They are often excluded from economic empowerment, social protection, but also even on leadership opportunities. with almost most of the policies lacking disaggregated data and failing to address even specific challenges. And further to that, the report has revealed significant government failures in addressing the intersection of gender and disability. Our recommendations, our ask to the African Union is that they must be able to meaningfully and actively engage women with disabilities and their representative organizations, including their regional and the Pan-African representative organizations, especially in human rights and inclusive governance processes at the regional and global level. We also ask the African Union to intensify the African Disability Protocol ratification campaign and urge all remaining member states to sign and ratify and implement it. Our ask to the governments is that they must ratify and further domesticate the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, on the rights of persons with disabilities, but also they must consider involving women-led organizations of persons with disability in any consultations on human rights and women's rights. And of course, they must promote the political participation of women and girls with disabilities within the national and local decision-making spaces. And finally, our ask to the civil society organizations and women's rights organizations is that they must meaningfully and actively cooperate with women with disabilities and their representative organizations. And they must also adopt an international, they must adopt an intentional, intersectional approach to women's rights and feminist questions and diversify leadership to include women with disabilities and their diversities. Thank you. And I believe that the report will be available for you to see it throughout. What I've given is just a summary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruth, for taking us through the findings and the recommendations of the report. For our advocacy to be impactful, it has to be evidence-based, and that's why this report is important. The next segment of this report launch is going to be about looking at how in different spaces we can use the findings and the recommendations of this report given our different roles. And for this segment, we'll have different speakers from the organizations or different organizations of persons with disabilities. We have persons with disabilities joining as speakers, and we have representatives from the UN, different UN agencies. So now I'd like us to move to the second segment, which is more of a discussion and reflections about how we can utilize these findings and recommendations. Our first speaker for this segment is Shitaye Atsawez, who is the Director of Communication and Advocacy at the Africa Disability Forum. Shitaye will focus on issues related to how we can utilize this report to improve advocacy at the regional level, but how the importance of the OPD-led advocacy towards ensuring gender equality for women and girls with disabilities. Over to you, Shitaye.
Thank you, Miriam. Thank you also for the kind introduction. Yes, my name is Shitaye Atsawez. I work for African Disability Forum, and I work as a Director for Advocacy and Communication and also Manager of the country office in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. First and foremost, I would like to thank those involved in the journey of getting ready this report, which is now gives us a benchmark for an important extension of the advocacy for women and girls with disabilities to be included in both regional and global human rights movements. When we talk about like girls and women with disabilities, we want to really amplify that it's a vivid reality that they are left between two movements. That is the movement of organizations of persons with disabilities, and also the movement of, in general, I mean, the mainstream women movements. We don't have such evidence, and in different categories of catastrophes that relates to natural phenomena or climate change. And also we don't have data and evidence out of the lived reality of conflict, and including armed conflict across the African region. And women with disabilities, including girls with disabilities, are also very much challenged and affected by gender-based violence. And they are not properly included in development initiatives. And also, if included, we don't have reliable data for that. So now I'm really happy for we have now this benchmark, this evidence that we have to anchor on the findings and the recommendations for now advocacy interventions, dialogue, and our initiatives on human rights protection to be used towards bringing those aspired changes for equality and equity. We are really aspired to be included meaningfully in dialogue and discussions, because we are facing every challenge, every difficulties, and we run like out of nowhere in relation to social protection policies. So my call today would be for development partners, for sub-regional and regional entities to really bring into light the situations that women and girls with disabilities live in today's Africa, across the African region. For this, we have to meaningfully include representative organizations of persons with disabilities.
Thank you so much, dear Shitai.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Many thanks for your intervention.
Thank you very much, Shitai, for your interventions. I would like to move to the other speaker, who is Maria Kalwala. Maria Kalwala is the vice chairperson of the committee of the Women's Committee of Malawi National Association of the Deaf. Maria, this report ensured deaf women and the representative organization contributions are included. The survey was, for instance, translated into international sign language. Why is it crucial to include underrepresented groups, including deaf women, in gender equality processes? Thank you. Over to you, Maria.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to present. My name is Maria Kalwala. The importance of engaging underrepresented groups and how participation of deaf women was crucial in ensuring their issues are heard. A call that all stakeholders include deaf women in gender equality efforts. I'm speaking today on behalf from the WF, who is an international non-governmental organization representing the and promoting approximately 70 million deaf people. Representing and promoting approximately 70 million deaf people, human rights worldwide, and today they have delegated to me this important space at the African Beijing+30 parallel report. Today, I would like to talk about the crucial importance of engaging underrepresented groups in our society, and especially the vital role that deaf women play in ensuring their unique issues are spotlighted and addressed. First of all, the importance of representation is essential for the health and progress of our communities. When you include diverse perspectives, or gain a richer understanding of the challenges and opportunities that exist for underrepresented groups like ours, leading to more innovative solutions and a more equitable society, especially in gender equality efforts. Deaf women face distinct challenges such as barriers to communication, access to education, and employment opportunities. These issues cannot be ignored. Including the participation of deaf women can truly be transformative as we bring attention to issues that might otherwise be missed. However, we need access. To participate with equal conditions with our other counterparts and stakeholders meeting, covering all accessible needs for all, including deaf women. I would like then to summarize briefly a few of the several issues that we face. And these are communication barriers. Communication barriers, this can include the lack of access to interpreters in healthcare settings, education, institution, and workplaces. Gender violence is also another aspect. Deaf women are at a high risk of experiencing gender-based violence. We face additional challenges in reporting abuse and accessing information services due to communication barriers. Under representation or marginalization, deaf women often excluded.
Sorry, Maria, please summarize. Summarize.
All right. Gender violence. Deaf women are also at high risk of experiencing gender-based violence. We face additional challenges in reporting abuse and accessing support services due to communication barriers. Under representation of marginalization, deaf women are often included from social activities, capacity building activities, community events, and grassroots movements due to lack of experience and being empowered to participate. Today, we would like to call on stakeholders, government, organizations, and communities to actively include deaf women in their gender equality efforts. This is not inviting us to the table, but also ensuring that we have the tool and support if we need to fully participate, like securing sign language interpreters, making accessible meeting environments, and value our contributions.
Thank you very much, Maria, and thank you so much for also delving into the theme of gender-based violence, which is the focus of our next panelist. And the next panelist is Djaba Diallo, who is the president of Women in Law and Development in Africa. And Diallo is going to focus on gender-based violence and how the findings of this report can be used at national level advocacy. Over to you, Djaba Diallo.
Le plaidoyer au niveau national. À vous la parole.
Madame Jennifer Diallo. Oh, mesdames, messieurs. Je me sens aujourd'hui non seulement comme activiste, mais aussi en tant que
Excuse-moi, Radi, il faut réactiver ton son, s'il te plaît. C'est bon. Pas de souci, c'est bon. On vous entend.
Dire un peu des gros mots.
Please proceed. Djaba, can you hear us?
Bon. On t'entend, chère Djenaba, c'est bon.
Maintenant, le micro est allumé.
Sorry, we have a slight connection issue with Dakar. Désolée pour ce petit souci.
Allez.
Alors, chère Djenaba, on ne te voit plus. Je pense qu'on t'entend.
D'accord. Non, parce que là, ça fait des tu recommences ça.
C'est bon.
Recommence.
On te voit et on t'entend.
Non seulement activiste, mais pour vous parler des violences que subissent malgré les efforts. Les femmes handicapées sont touchées de manière disproportionnée. Les chiffres sont alarmants. 83% des femmes handicapées subiront des violences sexuelles au cours de leur vie. Il ne s'agit pas simplement des violences domestiques ou sexuelles, mais souvent les formes de violence spécifiques à la condition. La stérilisation forcée, la privatisation. Le réseau MIDAF agit pour promouvoir les droits des femmes en Afrique, y compris des femmes en situation de handicap depuis 1990. Nous sommes présentes dans 11 pays de l'Afrique de l'Ouest. Nous constatons chaque jour que ces violences sont peu prises en compte. Nos projets influent des actions de sensibilisation, de formation et de plaidoyer. Mais les défis sont encore immenses. La justice reste inaccessible pour beaucoup de femmes handicapées survivantes de violences basées sur le genre. La sensibilisation fait défaut au niveau des acteurs de la justice et le manque d'aménagement procédural. En Afrique, les politiques publiques sur les violences basées sur le genre ignorent presque entièrement les femmes handicapées, comme le mentionne le rapport Puissantes mais ignorées, qui nous vient d'être livré. Au sein de WILDAF, nous luttons pour que ces femmes soient plus invisibles. Nous avons fait de l'inclusion de leader au sein de l'organisation. Je rappelle que je suis la vice-présidente de WILDAF Sénégal. Les femmes handicapées participent à toutes nos actions et nous battons pour que leur réalité soit prise en compte depuis la conception des projets. Cela nous amène à quelques questions essentielles. Où en est la société civile féminine face à cette exclusion? Bien sûr, de nombreuses organisations se battent contre les violences basées sur le genre. Il est nécessaire de rapporter que les femmes handicapées doivent être au cœur de cette lutte. Pourtant, de nombreux espaces féministes restent souvent marginalisés. Les organisations ne font pas toujours l'effort. Je souhaite faire écho aux recommandations de ce rapport. J'en appelle à toutes les organisations féministes. Il est temps de faire de la place aux femmes handicapées. Il est temps de reconnaître la diversité des expériences féministes. L'exclusion des femmes handicapées est une omission grave. Sans une approche intersectionnelle, nous ne pouvons jamais véritablement mettre fin aux violences basées sur le genre.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Diaba Diallo, and my sincere apologies to our audience for that short interruption because of the issues related to technical. I would like now to invite Kadi B. Kadi B is the...
Nous espérons que on nous entend dans le webinaire. Nous avons quelques problèmes techniques, mais je vois Nigel qui réussit à interpréter en signe, donc je suis assez optimiste. Nous allons effectivement immédiatement passer la parole à Khadiba, qui est la présidente du comité des femmes FESAF ici au Sénégal. Radi, à toi.
Avec la caméra sur elle.
Je viens prendre la parole au nom du comité des femmes de la Fédération sénégalaise des associations de personnes handicapées, qui regroupe 28 associations de personnes handicapées avec toutes les catégories confondues. Il y a la diversité au niveau de ce comité. Et nous sommes également sur tout le territoire sénégalais, dans les 36 départements et les 14 régions du Sénégal. Je commencerai par saluer mesdames et messieurs les représentants des ONG ici présents, madame et monsieur les autorités également, et madame la présidente sortante du CFESAF, madame Daïda Gueye, que je viens de représenter, de remplacer. Mesdames, messieurs, selon le recensement général de la population de 2013, 59 Sénégalais sur 1000 ont un handicap quelconque, avec un rapport de masculinité de 88 femmes pour 1000, 88 hommes pour 1000 femmes, pour 100 femmes. Les individus de sexe féminin sont les plus concernés. Et vous le savez, lors de la conférence de Beijing, la déclaration et le programme d'action qui avait été adopté, considéré comme la Déclaration des droits internationaux des femmes, la communauté internationale dans une démarche inclusive, intégrant la prise en charge des femmes et des filles en situation de handicap, était parvenue à un consensus et avait accepté de souscrire à un essentiel engagement allant dans le sens du plein développement des femmes, et de leur égalité vis-à-vis du genre masculin. 12 domaines que je vais me permettre de vous citer, de rappeler ici que étaient identifiés. Il s'agit les 12 domaines étaient les femmes, la pauvreté, l'éducation et la formation des femmes, les femmes et la santé, la violence à l'égard des femmes, les femmes et les conflits armés, les femmes et l'économie, les femmes, le pouvoir et la prise de décision, les mécanismes institutionnels pour la promotion des femmes, les droits humains des femmes également, les femmes et l'environnement et les filles. Dans la même lancée, l'État du Sénégal a ratifié la Convention relative aux droits des personnes handicapées par la loi numéro 2009-30 du 2 décembre 2009. Et cette ratification de la Convention est devenue un élément de l'ordonnancement juridique interne du Sénégal où elle a acquis une autorité supérieure à celle des lois conformément à l'article 98 de la Constitution. Dès lors, comme la Constitution, la loi et les règlements de la Constitution font désormais partie du consensus juridique national que les organes de l'État ont l'obligation d'appliquer.
Il reste 1 minute, donc il faut aller à la conclusion.
Effectivement. La protection des femmes et filles contre les violences reste une priorité nationale. Le Code pénal sénégalais punit sévèrement les violences faites aux femmes et filles handicapées. L'accès à l'éducation, à l'emploi est essentiel et l'autonomisation des femmes handicapées et des filles. Le gouvernement sénégalais encourage les entreprises également à recruter des filles et handicapées et dans des postes de direction. Aujourd'hui, plus que jamais, l'inclusion sociale des filles est au cœur du combat que mènent toutes les ONG dans la généralité, la société civile, les partenaires techniques et financiers à travers un plaidoyer fort et l'application de la panoplie de textes autour des mesures prises par le Sénégal. Nous, au niveau du comité des femmes, nous l'avons reconnu que les jeunes, surtout les jeunes filles, ont une très grande importance au niveau du comité et nous avons fait une création d'une section de jeunes où nous avons le mentorat. Nous avons fait le dialogue intergénérationnel, les techniques d'embauche pour l'emploi, l'appropriation des droits également, le développement personnel, le leadership transformationnel, les violences basées sur le genre.
Et cher Hadi, c'est le moment de conclure.
Et je vous remercie. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Dakar team. Thank you very much, and thank you to our speaker, Kadibi. I would like now to invite Benedicta. Benedicta is going to look at the feminist movement and how it can be more inclusive of women and girls with disabilities. Benedicta is the president of Foundation of Young Amazons for Development. Over to you, Benedicta. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, mesdames, messieurs. C'est pour moi un privilège de prendre part à cette discussion de vraiment haute importance. Je suis Benedicta Aloa Kenou, féministe béninoise et la présidente de la Fondation des Jeunes Amazones pour le développement. Alors, en tant que féministe africaine, ce rapport Puissantes mais ignorées, moi, personnellement, m'interpelle. M'interpelle parce qu'il montre clairement à quel point les femmes handicapées sont invisibles dans nos mouvements, dans les politiques de développement et même dans les espaces de lutte contre les violences basées sur le genre. Et donc, en tant qu'organisation féministe, nous avons ce devoir-là de solidarité et de coalition avec les organisations de femmes handicapées. Je pense qu'il ne suffit plus aujourd'hui de les inclure en tant que bénéficiaires de nos actions, mais elles doivent être au cœur de la conception de ces solutions-là. Donc, cela rejoint des recommandations du rapport qui appellent à diversifier les leaderships dans les mouvements féministes pour inclure ces femmes-là et pour co-créer des espaces de plaidoyer communs avec nos sœurs. Alors, à la Fondation des Jeunes Amazones pour le développement, nous avons fait de ce principe une réalité et depuis 2022, notre directrice exécutive, qui autrefois faisait partie des bénévoles de notre organisation, est une femme handicapée visuelle. Et le fait de l'intégrer, cette intégration-là, a permis effectivement, nous, d'enrichir notre perspective sur les droits des femmes, de voir autrement l'intersectionnalité. Et ça nous a permis aujourd'hui de pouvoir être plus au cœur des actions des associations de femmes handicapées, de créer des coalitions pour mieux répondre aux besoins spécifiques avec nos sœurs. Et cette expérience renforce ma vision de l'engagement féministe qui aujourd'hui intègre l'inclusion numérique, l'intersectionnalité et d'autres rapports avec la justice de genre. Et ce rapport soulève justement deux de ces enjeux-là que sont l'inclusion et l'accessibilité, en recommandant de faire une priorité dès les premières étapes de la conception de nos projets et de nos initiatives. Et j'entrevois sous deux angles l'inclusion en question, y compris l'inclusion en matière de langue. On dit souvent que la question de l'inclusion numérique des femmes est une question aussi d'accès aux outils numériques. Et c'est une réalité, c'est une expérience que nous vivons. Et en fait, la question de la justice linguistique, c'est un autre aspect clé qu'on n'aborde pas souvent, mais qui est essentiel dans nos mouvements féministes et y compris dans nos collaborations avec les mouvements de femmes handicapées pour nous permettre de participer pleinement à la société. Donc, les barrières linguistiques constituent un frein à l'inclusion et à notre engagement de façon générale, mais aussi spécifique à l'égalité. Et ce ne sera pas complet pour nous de travailler en mettant cela de côté, y compris avec les femmes handicapées, pour un accès à l'information et aux services. Et pour conclure, pour moi, Puissantes mais ignorées va être un appel à l'action. C'est d'ailleurs ce que c'est pour moi, ça m'a interpellée et c'est un appel à l'action, comme l'a dit la présidente du mouvement des Nations Unies dans l'avant-propos de ce rapport même. Les organisations féministes et de défense des droits des femmes et des personnes handicapées doivent faire front commun et veiller à ce que les voix et le leadership des femmes et filles handicapées soient placés au cœur de notre plaidoyer collectif. Leur exclusion affaiblit l'ensemble du mouvement pour la justice en matière de genre. L'heure est venue de procéder à des changements inclusifs et significatifs. Mesdames, Messieurs, chères sœurs féministes, organisations féministes de la société civile, effectivement, l'heure est venue d'ôter le doute. Il faut aujourd'hui que nous sautons le pas des hésitations, que nous œuvrons ensemble pour un monde inclusif. Inclusif qui prévalent les talents, un monde où prévalent les talents aux dépens des handicaps. Engageons-nous et je vous remercie.
Thank you, Benedicta, and my apologies for the cutting you short. We are running out of time, and I would like us to hear from our next two speakers, our last two speakers. So the first, the last speakers were mainly persons with disabilities and representative of organizations of persons with disabilities. We've had a lot of issues being raised, and the most running thread is about inclusion of persons with women with disabilities and their representative organizations in the processes that are addressing gender equality. Our next speakers are from the UN, different UN agencies, and therefore we'll be looking more at how the UN can include organizations of persons with disabilities and women with disabilities in different processes, including the Beijing+30 process. I would like now to invite Keiso Matanashe Marite, who is the Chief Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment at the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Okay, so what is UNECA's role and how will these findings and recommendations inform your work?
Thank you very much, Miriam. A slight correction. My name is Keiso Mata Shani Marite. Let me start by congratulating the authors, DIWA, IDA, and WFD for this powerful publication on the eve of Beijing+30 review, which is next week. It is timely and it provides a good resource, reference, and evidence that everybody has talked about for all of us who are working in spaces where there is exclusion and silencing of voices of humanity. I will just actually emphasize humanity because the figures that have been quoted in the publication actually add value to the work that the UN is doing, especially WHO and UNDP. And I just want to pick two figures that were quoted. First of all, to reaffirm that 80% of people with disabilities are between the ages of 18 and 64, productive ages. And 80% of people with disabilities live in developing countries, the spaces where we are working, especially for us here at ECA in Africa. And also, they suggest 20% of women are employed. This actually shows a lot of exclusion of humanity. They should be working like everybody else. Now, looking at our preparedness as the United Nations, first of all, to reassure everybody that the UN system is committed to diversity and inclusion. And we do so through the mandates that guide our work. The first one being the UN Charter, which actually reaffirms diversity, inclusion, and human rights. So we are not doing it as a favor or out of pity. It is because it is our work to do so. Really, not only is it the right thing to do, but it is also the smart thing to do, looking at of where we are, majority are in the countries where we are working in. Now, the UN as an employer, it is obligated to put in place and safeguard, first of all, the values and behaviors that resonate with the principles of the UN Charter, our founding document. This includes fostering a positive change of attitudes that does not tolerate gender disability stereotypes. This is the first one. And also, if you look at the values that guide our work, the new values in particular that have been put in place, inclusion is the first one. Not only gender inclusion, but disability inclusion, integrity, humility, and humanity. And we have been provided with a disability inclusion strategy. And let me say that for us in ECA, this is actually mandatory. We are expected to mainstream gender into our work, to integrate climate change into our work, and to integrate disability into our work. And we do so also, we are expected to actually undertake mandatory training on how to do it, because many of us do not know how to do it. We are also guided with procedures. Here I'm talking about UNECA and the policies. This is UN-wide, and the policies that promote reasonable accommodation and universal design. These ones are blueprinted in the guiding documents that guide our work. And we are trying, even though it is a struggle, to put in place mechanisms and support structures and systems that actually deepen accountability to inclusion, and also to take decisive steps and make necessary and decisive modifications and adjustments without imposing disproportionate burden, in order to ensure that people with disability, especially women with disability, enjoy the rights in the workplace like everybody else. And what is emphasized in this is the consultation, the voice. And I am happy that the publication has gone ahead to interview more than 240 women with disabilities, meaning their perspectives were sought, their opinions were sought, their lived realities and insights were taken into account in this powerful publication. And it does provide us with evidence, because we are a think tank here at ECA. We are bound to show evidence in the work that we do. And we are also bound to create an inclusive environment where colleagues, irrespective of ability, but in particular, people with disability and women with disability, feel respected, feel valued, feel free to express themselves without fear or ridicule, where their ideas and thoughts are embraced and opportunities for growth and for career growth is given to them. And we do so through flexibility and also, arrangements like flexible working arrangements are done. We are trying to work very hard, even though we are not yet there, to build an environment free of discrimination and harassment. This goes to all women, and taking into account that women with disability face a lot more barriers, we need to do a little bit more than what we do. But sadly, I want to say that as in the UN are not so good. We do not have enough numbers of women with disability in the UN, and the UN really is trying to do this. This is an area where I can say it is work in progress. It has been a struggle in the last decade to come up with a gender parity strategy, and we are trying through our initiatives on initiatives to ensure that inclusion actually extend to people with disability, to bring the vigor and the evidence try. So what we are really doing in the UN is to ensure that the UN system-wide disability strategy is enforced.
I invite you to conclude. Thank you.
And now coming to the pre-CSW and Beijing+30. I need to remind this launch that this is a UN meeting, and therefore all the UN principles of inclusion will be observed, from ensuring that access is there.
Dear Keiso, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Keiso. I'll let you have the microphone for us to get more details about the processes. But I hope the next speaker is going to give us some insights about the Beijing Plus processes and what the UN is doing about it. Our last speaker is Hodan. Allow me just to use the first name, and then you can introduce yourself fully. Hodan is the Regional Director, UN Women East and Southern Africa. And Hodan, the UN Women is at the heart of the Beijing+30 processes. We would like to hear how you're ensuring that women with disabilities and their representative organizations are included throughout this process, and more how you plan also to ensure that post-Beijing+30, that women with disabilities will continue being engaged by the UN Women. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, perfectly. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you. Good afternoon, Habari. I'm calling from Tanzania at the moment, but really want to first of all thank you and Much appreciation to the organizers of this really important launch event, and for sharing reflections on what the Beijing +30 processes that hopefully will be starting beginning of next year. But of course, the various consultations that are going to be taking place next week, and ensuring that the voices and the active engagement of women with disabilities is up the forefront in this very important process that will be held in Addis Ababa starting next week. But first, I want to thank you for inviting UN Women, and really a pleasure to be with you representing my organization in Eastern and Southern Africa. We congratulate, as everyone else has, the many individuals who contributed to this report and for amplifying the voices and different perspectives and experiences of the diverse women with disabilities, and on progress towards achieving gender equality, women's empowerment as set out in the Beijing Platform for Action in 1995, but of course informed also by the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which is very much connected with Beijing's aspirations. The perspectives on change in policy, practices, programming, legislations and rights, as well as the intersection forms of discrimination that continue to marginalize women with disabilities from contributing to and benefiting from the aspirations of the Platform for Action are key. This year, as it was stated, the African Union and the United Nations are conducting the regional review progress and challenges in realizing the aspirations of the Platform for Action, which is essential that there is recognition where women with disabilities and organizations are contributing to change on the continent. There is a deliberate effort to ensure that, but of course we could all do more. Indeed, this report will enrich the analysis with insights from the lived lives, experiences, and realities of many women and girls who are often excluded and made invisible by the data. And that's one critical thing I think that we need to emphasize is we need to ensure that our data and research is more inclusive, and ensuring that whether it's the census or the DHS or any other survey is inclusive, that it captures all women and girls in our countries and in our regions. Your perspectives, really very, very happy to hear the perspectives and the strong voices for many of the women who spoke earlier and their experiences representing the organizations and the women from their communities is really heartwarming. And it's very important to ensure that these recommendations and actions not only are amplified in the consultations that are taking place next week and the week after when the ministers of Africa will be meeting, but ensuring that we carry this forward in next year. And that's a commitment that you have from UN Women in Eastern and Southern Africa. We really want to see how we can work together with the organizers and amplifying and disseminating this very important information and recommendations as widely as possible. Today, we reflect on the stark reality that after 30 years of Beijing Declaration, women with disabilities in Africa remain largely excluded, as it was said earlier, from various policy processes and that have an influence on their lives. This inclusion leaves them invisible in national and regional efforts to advance gender equality, reinforces the need for urgent change. And by this inclusion, many of our countries have not, will not be able to reach the Sustainable Development Goals, nor will they be able to achieve the goals and the aspirations of the Beijing Platform for Action if women with disabilities and girls with disabilities are left behind. The report we are launching today motivates all of us to advocate for women-led processes in policy and legislation changes, in ensuring program interventions, resources, budgeting, and planning perspectives are truly inclusive. It reminds us that women with disabilities must not only be represented, but they must be leading in shaping the policies and programs that impact them directly. The importance of this cannot be overstated, and they are not just beneficiaries, as it was said, but they are leaders, they're advocates, they're the drivers of change that we want to see throughout the world. In this regard, I would like to share an example of the work that UN Women, together with the United Nations systems, are working together in Tanzania as a good example of what is possible when intentional and inclusive efforts are made. And these efforts were made possible through the UN Partnership on the Rights of Persons with Disability, the UNPRPD. It's a unique partnership that brings together UN entities, governments, organizations with people with disabilities, and as UN Women, we ensure that those organizations are being represented by women-led organizations who are living with disabilities. I'm very, very proud of that. And broader, of course, civil society, human rights organizations, and private sector to advance the rights of persons with disabilities around the world, but in particular in Tanzania. We've seen a number of key achievements, notably the National Disability Policy in Tanzania that's being drafted. Very much instrumental are the organizations with persons with disabilities, particularly women-led organizations, as well as, of course, efforts around the engagement of women with disabilities and their organizations in developing and contributing to, for example, the National Development Plan, the 2050 plan that's taking place, various consultations led by the women with disability organizations, as well as, of course, ensuring that the gender policy, the National Action Plan on Elimination of Violence Against Women and Girls, and many others are truly representative of the aspirations. And most importantly, now we're seeing, of course, elections that are coming up in many of our countries. We need to ensure that the voices and representation of women with disabilities are engaged in the electoral processes, and that there's conducive environment for their participation, but also in terms of not only as voters, but as aspirants as well. And that's something that we're trying to do throughout our programs on women leadership and political participation in many of the countries here. Data is definitely critical, as it's a way of informing policies, financing, and budgeting, and we need to make sure that we amplify that, and organizations with living with disabilities are very much engaged. Interesting programs as well, and it's important that we ensure that resources are going to support organizations, young women as well, in schools, in economic empowerment programs, in making sure that there is truly inclusion, there's budgeting for that. So those are huge efforts that we need to ensure to share that there's truly inclusion throughout the board. So not just only resting in policies, but programming, then resources, and that there's true representation in the political sphere, both at local and national and parliamentary levels as well. As UN Women, we remain committed to working in a more inclusive and intersectional ways, moving forward together with our UN agencies, with our women's rights organizations, and with the women-led organizations that are living with disabilities, and ensuring that there's truly equitable Africa for all. And this is something that we aim to bring and ensure that various processes that we're supporting at regional and continental level. And just want to add, at the moment, the AU is developing a convention on violence, eliminating violence against women. And as UN Women, we've been very much advocating to ensure that this convention at continental wide does take into account the voices, the concerns and rights of women and girls and living with disabilities. And we believe so that the AU is actually heading in that direction as well. So let's all come together, work together, but ensure that we don't speak for people with living with disabilities. They speak for themselves, but we ensure that we facilitate and provide the environment to ensure that we use also our influence to try to open as many doors for them, but also they have a right, as we've seen earlier, to demand governments, to demand UN agencies, to demand civil society and everyone that we do have an equitable and inclusive Africa for all. So really want to say thank you so much for inviting us, and all the very best.
Thank you very much. Hold on. I added a few minutes for your speech because I noted there were questions that were being raised about how the UN can ensure that member states are held accountable to ensure that they include organizations of persons with disabilities, organizations led by women with disabilities in the national consultation, as well as the regional and the global processes. So I wanted to make sure that you're able to cover some of those issues in your speech. And if you do have any additions, please, you'll add after we have during this segment of questions and answers. So I want to take this opportunity to thank our speakers of the first and the second segment. Sorry, there's someone. And we'll move now to the final segment, which is the question and comment session and the official launch of the report afterwards. I see the first question, which this is essentially to the organizers of this webinar and the authors of this report. There's a question about, is there a public communication plan to be launched with key messages from the report? It is really important that these issues are disseminated to the widest public community. Sophie, I will let you handle that one. And then, of course, there was the question around how to ensure member states actively engage and involve organizations of women with disabilities and women with disabilities at national, regional, and global level throughout the Beijing+30 processes. So those were two questions from the chat, and I see comments around importance of campaigns and awareness raising. Sophie, can you hear me? Do we have questions from Dakar?
Alors,
Sophie, any questions from the room?
Nous sommes là à Dakar, j'espère que vous nous entendez. Nous sommes très ravis, une grande représentation des femmes handicapées. Hein. Elles ne sont pas, effectivement. Merci, bravo. Vous les voyez, je vais tourner la caméra, mais la salle est bien pleine. Je vais remettre la salle, ça sera mieux plutôt que mon décolleté. Merci. Un peu d'humour, voilà. Donc, nous sommes ici. Est-ce qu'il y a une question dans la salle? Est-ce qu'une personne souhaite poser une question à une panéliste, s'il vous plaît? Eh bien, je crois que nous avons été toutes assez émues par toutes les interventions. Il n'y a pas de questions, mais nous allons avoir ensuite un moment d'échange entre nous un petit peu sympathique et festif, puisque nous avons aussi ici à Dakar la chance d'avoir une musicienne, Khady Pouy, qui est une femme handicapée musicienne, et nous allons pouvoir l'entendre et manger un morceau ensemble comme on le fait si bien au Sénégal. Donc, je vous repasse la parole s'il y a une question par ailleurs.
Sophie, can we move to Lilongwe, Ruth?
Yes, thank you so much. We also have the group here, but one person has a question. question. You introduce yourself and then you ask the question, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Hilda Majeso from the Association of Persons with Albinism in Malawi. It's wonderful to be here. My question is, in the cases where policies that advocate for the inclusion of women and girls with disabilities in these spaces, in the case where these national, international laws, rules or policies, let's just go with policies, haven't been yet domesticated by a country, but we actually see that there is actually for that policy in that country. How does the UN come in to make sure that the actual, maybe like the member states, sorry?
Member states?
Not the member states per se, but yes, I can just go with the member states right now. But how does the UN now go and to make sure that the member states follow that particular policy or to address the particular need? Thank you. I don't know if my question has been clearly relayed.
Thank you. Thank you. It's related to the question that had been shared in the question and answer. And I believe that most of the questions have been related to compliance and how the UN can promote and ensure compliance by member states of the different commitments that they've made around gender equality and for women, including women with disabilities. So I'll hand over to Keiso and Hodan. If you have any information, 1 minute each, in your response about how we can ensure and accelerate implementation of policies, gender equality policies, then we'll be more happy to hear from you. Thank you.
Let me start, Miriam. For us at the Economic Commission for Africa, we have the responsibility actually, or a mandate from ECOSOC to build capacity of member states. One, to report and also implement the commitments that they have done at regional, at global, and also at national level. We do have that mandate to actually support. For us, we do that through technical support, really, for policy formulation, to ensure that whatever support that we provide is, first of all, starting with us, we need to ensure that we mainstream the issues that I talked about. Gender, it is a requirement that whatever programs that we design to support member states with are gender responsive. And the second one that we are struggling with, but we are really starting, is disability. Wherever we go, we try to look at the policy space and also to try and look at the monitoring and evaluation of the efforts of member states on the normative framework that they have signed up to, on whether there are enough programs and how those programs can be underdone. Unfortunately, our support can only be advisory, we can't force, but we are also mandated to build capacity for them to do that, because many times member states will have ratified these conventions. They will have actually undertaken and is mechanisms to comply, but what usually becomes a gap is the capacity to do so. We have developed toolkits, we have developed indexes, and we have also developed guidance on how member states can do that. So I think for us, we do use our space to provide technical support and also our convening power to bring member states together at Addis Ababa level or at New York level or at different levels for them to report. And through reporting, they need to provide evidence. And you know the power of naming and shaming. When other countries are doing well, others would want to emulate. So it is a gentle push, and Beijing+30 initiatives are one of those that we are hoping will actually ensure that member states will look at what other countries are doing and also pull up their success.
So, Hodan, any additional comments from your side?
Yeah, thank you. I think my colleague from UNECA, Queso, had covered it all. But I think maybe just to add, especially the question around how are we engaging or including people with disabilities in the consultations that are taking place. So there are various consultations. There's a civil society consultation. There's also the youth consultations, and I think we had about over 6,000 applicants and so forth. So the screening that was done, one of the important criteria was to ensure that we do have a representations from women and girls living with disabilities, and ensuring that also that the conditions are conducive for them, that meeting room, they have full access. We're also, in many of those cases, we've been supporting and funding individuals to accompany, anyone that might need assistance. So to accommodating that, so that there is, as much possible inclusion of participation of women and girls with disabilities, both in the CSOs and of course in the youth consultation, and then also in the expert group consultations as well. The other point is, I think when we were looking at the national reviews, definitely for Beijing Platform for Action, we're looking very, very carefully in terms of how do we ensure that the reporting that was done at the national level for the Beijing+30 process review does take into consideration progress that has been made. Of course, many of these reports, as stated in your report, there's a lot of challenges that we still have in terms of where we want to go and where we ensure that there is true inclusion. So there's still quite a work to do, and in those reports, as well as, of course, what we're doing is in terms of holding governments accountable is through, for example, in the human rights, the UPR, as well as, of course, in the as well as looking at other instruments, international human rights instruments that are specifically looking at people with disabilities, their rights and inclusion and so forth. We've had also various rapporteurs that visit the countries from, especially, for example, people with albinism that the previous colleague had mentioned, and those are really taken into account. There's the consultations with women's groups, with people with albinism, for example, with a special rapporteur, with government, and to ensure that the policies, the legislations, any also discriminatory acts are addressed and alerted to the government, and ensuring that we then put in place and help to put in place strong systems of government, strong systems that are human rights-based approach, and that there's true representation throughout. And I think those are there's so many efforts that are there. At the end of the day, as my colleague Kirsa had said, it's really up to the governments, but we're here to provide support. We document. We use also the CSW, which is the Commission on the Status of Women, that is also being reviewed every year on various processes. The issues of disabilities and disability inclusion is a very, very important aspect of all of these review processes. There's also a summit that is taking place next year on people with disabilities. As UN Women, we want to make sure that women and girls organizations are represented, their voices are there. So there's already a process, there's a call for action, and next year being the most important year for us, for gender advocates, the 30th anniversary. We really want to make sure that throughout all of our processes, the consultations, the reviews, the engagement, the advocacy, we're highlighting all the plights of women, all women, in our work, in our programs, in our policies, in our engagements with governments. So let me end there. Sorry. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Hodan. There's so much to discuss and to hear from everybody. And due to time constraints, I would like now to move to the official launch of the report. So I'll hand over to my colleague, Ax.
Merci beaucoup, chère Myriam. Merci beaucoup à toutes les intervenantes et à toutes les participantes et participants qui nous ont suivis. Nous allons désormais visionner la courte vidéo de lancement officiel de ce rapport, en espérant que la connexion soit stable et soit avec nous. C'est parti.
Puissante mais ignorée.
Powerful yet overlooked.
Mais ignorée. Puissante.
Powerful yet overlooked.
Puissante mais ignorée.
Powerful yet overlooked.
Puissante mais ignorée.
Powerful yet overlooked.
Puissante mais ignorée. Puissante.
Powerful yet overlooked.
Puissante mais ignorée.
Powerful yet overlooked.
Puissante mais ignorée. Puissante.
Powerful yet overlooked.
Puissante mais ignorée.
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 Puissante mais ignorée.
Puissante mais ignorée.
Wow.
Magnifique, merci, j'espère que vous nous entendez. Nous sommes donc à Dakar, nous venons donc de lancer officiellement ce rapport sur lequel nous avons travaillé depuis une année. Je pense qu'on peut applaudir encore, même si effectivement on a écouté beaucoup de choses extrêmement intéressantes. C'est le moment des remerciements. Alors, je vais essayer d'oublier personne. Je vais commencer par remercier les 244 femmes handicapées et personnes minorisées de genre handicapées qui ont répondu à notre enquête en français, en anglais, en portugais et en langue des signes. Merci à elles et eux. Ce rapport, c'est leur voix. Merci infiniment également aux organisations féministes avec des femmes dans leur leadership. Je me tourne vers ma sœur Diaynaba. Merci aux organisations de femmes handicapées. Ce rapport, c'est évidemment vous qui l'avez coécrit, 23 organisations avec nous. Bravo à vous, organisations de femmes handicapées africaines, bien sûr. Un immense merci évidemment à nos panélistes. Je ne redis pas cette liste impressionnante de femmes, toutes femmes puissantes, femmes de pouvoir. Et je remercie bien sûr toutes les co-autrices avec moi. Je vais me permettre peut-être un tout petit peu de tourner la caméra si on réussit. Merci. Donc les co-autrices avec moi, ma collègue évidemment de HI, Axence Rossignol. Un immense merci Axence. Merci à Isabelle Lameau qui a contribué à ce rapport. IDA, International Disability Alliance, Myriam Ntenge, énorme merci. Disabled Women in Africa, Diwa, Ruth Mkutumula, merci à toi, chère Ruth, et Penina Wulimu, World Federation of the Deaf. Ça a été, j'espère n'avoir oublié personne, mais je ne le crois pas. Et nous avons aussi eu la contribution de Christine Candy de Ndorois, sans oublier Juliane Nduta, qui nous fait bénéficier de son expertise, femme kenyane qui nous aide depuis la France. Merci infiniment à toutes les autrices, merci à toutes ces femmes qui se sont exprimées. Le rapport, il est déjà en ligne. On va vous partager le lien, on va vous l'envoyer par mail. Il est en français, il est en anglais, il est à vous. Faites-en quelque chose, lisez-le, partagez-le. C'est un peu unique, comme dit Ruth, c'est, je crois, un rapport un peu historique parce que ça n'avait pas été fait de cette façon pour Beijing+25. Le chemin continue, les femmes handicapées sont là, sont puissantes, oui, parfois sont ignorées, je l'espère de moins en moins, et retrouvons-nous en mars peut-être à New York, et en tout cas, pour nous, un moment festif va commencer parce que c'est aussi une joie. Merci infiniment aux participantes et participants. Voilà, nous vous envoyons un salut féministe et antivalidiste depuis Dakar. Merci.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sophie, for the closing remarks. Thank you for everyone who has been able to join us today, from Canada to Nigeria, to Addis, to Tanzania, to Kenya. Thank you to Niger, to Senegal, to Lilongwe. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hope to see some of you in Addis next week and again in New York. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This marks the end. Thank you, Lily. Where do we live now?